In 2006, the American Embassy in Lithuania received the following cable from the then Lithuanian Prime Minister, Albinas Januska. He stated that a group of UFOs are making their influence from the cosmos, and that there exists a decreasing group of persons who are trying to rationally analyse the situation and objectively evaluate what is happening. In 2007, the Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary said, "I am sure that unidentified flying objects exist." A former NASA astronaut, Dr. Brian O'Leary, stated that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional, materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness. They use toroids. They use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. Prime Ministers, Chief Cabinet Secretaries and NASA astronauts all testifying to the truth that thousands of ordinary people across the globe know as fact. That aliens exist, that they have and are visiting our planet. The world's largest and most powerful organisation with the biggest array of technology ever known to man is NASA. They too know the truth, and they are covering it up. Recently, the number of known alien planets has increased by 60%. NASA's very own Kepler Space Telescope has discovered over 1,300 new exoplanets, many of which they claim might very well contain life. The total number now stands at well over 3,000 and counting. Paul Hertz, director of the Astrophysics Division at NASA, said, "Most stars in our galaxy have planetary systems, and a reasonable fraction of stars in our galaxy have potentially habitable planets." The number is increasing all the time. Most of the stars within our own galaxy have planetary systems that are potentially habitable. Millions of humans across thousands of years have witnessed them, and yet they are still denied. Alan Stofan, a chief scientist at NASA, said that there are strong indications of life beyond Earth, and it would likely be obtained within the next decade. She went so far as to state that this would be definite evidence. How would she know such a thing already? She said, "We are on the verge of things that people have wondered about for millennia. Within all of our lifetimes, we're going to understand that there is life on other bodies in the solar system. We're going to understand the implications of that for life here on Earth. A massive percentage of what NASA actually does is highly secret. There is good reason. NASA originated in the late 1950s, emerging from military research. Its main staff were military, and it has always maintained a very close link. Billions of dollars of research is carried out by NASA on behalf of the military. It is their purpose to protect the people of America from whatever the threat may be, and this includes panic. Recently, there has been a massive increase, albeit gradually, of information and suggestions coming from NASA about the possibility of life out there. They are already getting close for disclosure, and it must be done slowly and carefully, because the media are hungry wolves who love to liven up the public. Nobody wants international panic. It would be catastrophic. Recently, thousands of people cried cover-up when NASA's International Space Station live feed was cut suddenly, just as a UFO passed in clear view. The object was a horseshoe shape, and nobody has come forward with an explanation. Later footage recorded by people not working at NASA reveals a ship leaving the Earth's atmosphere and docking with another UFO, neither of which are NASA's. This is just one of hundreds of such cases, and it grows daily. The cover-ups began many years ago. Scott Carpenter was a test pilot and astronaut at NASA for many years. He said, "At no time when the astronauts were in space were they alone. There was a constant surveillance by UFOs." What exactly did he mean? He meant that the astronauts were constantly being buzzed by UFOs. There have indeed been several astronauts spoken out about their experiences, but most are silenced. Colonel Buzz Aldrin was with NASA for years, and one of the first men to set foot upon the moon. He was a national hero. He saw and experienced things. These experiences affected him. He had a nervous breakdown. At least, that's the official story. Author Fred Steckling claims that Aldrin was silenced. The reason was very simple. Aldrin saw alien bases on the moon. It is claimed by hundreds of investigators that actual close-up photographs of the moon have been tampered with. They have been airbrushed to remove what is really there, hidden from our sight. It is a stated fact that all photographs, then and now, are vetted by NASA before release to the public. Why? If there's nothing to hide, then why? Aldrin claimed that they were not the first people to set foot upon the moon. Somebody, or something, had been there before. He claims he took photographs of footprints, never released by NASA. This is what the author said. Alien vehicles flew within 50 feet of a US space vehicle for one full Earth orbit, and then the AV departed. Again, while Aldrin was present, Buzz Aldrin had a nervous breakdown because of these events and the pressure not to talk. There have been 22 deaths, many suicides, at JSC in Houston. No astronaut who has seen AVs or ETs is allowed to talk about it, even amongst themselves. If they do, and are caught, they may be fined, publicly humiliated, imprisoned, or have all pensions and future salaries taken away. Maybe we will never know what Aldrin and the others saw, but they weren't the last astronauts to report strange phenomena, only to be later silenced. Buzz Aldrin himself said, "There was something out there that was close enough to be observed, and what could it be?" Mike Collins decided he thought he could see it in the telescope, and he was able to do that, and when it was in one position. That had a series of ellipses. But when you made it a real shot, it was sort of L-shaped. Now obviously, the three of us were not going to blurt out, "Hey Houston, we got something moving alongside of us, and we don't know what it is." We weren't about to do that, because we know that those transmissions would be heard by all sorts of people, and who knows what somebody would have demanded that we turn back because of aliens or whatever the reason is. So we didn't do that. But we did decide we'd just cautiously ask Houston where, how far away, was the SIVB. Dr. David Baker, a senior NASA scientist, said, "NASA knew very little about the object reported by the Apollo 11 crew. It was obviously an unidentified flying object. But such objects were not uncommon, and the history of even Earth orbit space flights going back over the previous years indicated that several crews saw objects. There were a lot of people within the program who went off later and became convinced that UFOs existed, and that led to some concern on NASA's part, where they got the agreement of the crew never to publicly talk about these things, for fear of ridicule. How many astronauts have been silenced or refused to talk, we cannot say. But where there is one, there are more. What we do know is that there are literally thousands of pilots, both military and commercial, who have witnessed UFOs visiting the Earth, and not just above the atmosphere. Some can't be silenced. A woman known as Jackie recently came forward. Her name is being kept a secret for her own safety. She claims she worked for NASA and that she actually witnessed humans on Mars. Through the live feed that goes directly into NASA, she saw humans in spacesuits walking on the planet. If she really worked for NASA, then just how was she able to see such a thing? It turns out that she was working on the downlink telemetry from the Viking lander, the very first vehicle to ever send images back from Mars. Here's what she said in a live interview on Coast to Coast Radio. That old Viking rover was running around. Then I saw two men in spacesuits. Not the bulky suits we normally use, but they looked protective. They came over the horizon, walking to the Viking Explorer. When she saw this, along with 6 other colleagues, they immediately reported it. We ran upstairs, but they locked the door and taped paper over the door so we couldn't see. My question is, were they our guys? None of her colleagues have ever come forward, but there are hundreds of reports of secret space programs starting right back in the 1960s. There is little surprise that past employees want to remain secret. Apart from the fact they would probably be in danger from the secret services, they would also find themselves ridiculed by the media and a brainwashed public. And so, information comes forward anonymously.
So one must be quite cautious.
In 2005, an ex-employee of the Defense Intelligence Agency began leaking classified information about an alien exchange program called Project Serpo. This project began when the authorities recovered aliens from the crash at Roswell. The ex-DIA employee stated that it was one of the aliens, known as EBE-1, who suggested the exchange program and even helped organise a special team of humans to visit his home world, known as Serpo, in the Zeta Reticuli system. This happened in 1965, and the team stayed on Serpo until 1978. 2 died there, 2 stayed on the planet, and the rest returned. All have died due to radiation poisoning. All of this makes complete sense when we consider the thousands of abductees across the globe who claim to have been taken away and seen strange men in black. These men in black now have a reason to exist as facilitators of the alien exchange program. Of course, the aliens could be watching us and abducting us for another reason, and somebody at NASA has a theory on that. Rich Terrile is the director of the Center for Evolutionary Computation and Automated Design at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He posited the theory that may upset a few believers in God. His theory is that the real God is in fact a universal computer program. Here's what he said. Right now, the fastest NASA supercomputers are cranking away at double the speed of the human brain. His point being that more advanced computers would be even faster. If you make a simple calculation using Moore's law, which claims computers double in power every 2 years, you'll find that these supercomputers, inside of a decade, will have the ability to compute an entire human lifetime of 80 years, including every thought ever conceived during that time, in the span of a month. In fact, Moore's law is being proven incorrect because quantum computing will do these calculations in milliseconds. In quantum mechanics, particles do not have a definite state unless they're being observed. Many theorists have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to explain this. One explanation is that we're living within a simulation, seeing what we need to see when we need to see it. What I find inspiring is that even if we are in the simulation, or many orders of magnitude down in levels of simulation, somewhere along the line something escaped the primordial ooze to become us, and to result in simulations that made us, and that's cool. This explanation for our existence may sound even crazier than one that includes a god, but it does explain some things, such as why we can't find alien life, even though the mathematical equations show there should be an abundance. The cosmic computer won't allow it. Yet. Any beings outside of this massive simulation would not think the same as those inside the simulation. They would be different, alien. If they occasionally popped in and out of this grand matrix, they would appear the same as life in our existence, but in reality be simple cloaks or holograms. Such a theory explains beautifully the hundreds of anomalies we come across when researching aliens. The ability of craft to move in seemingly physical, impossible ways, the access to our minds when we are abducted, the way aliens appear and disappear, the archetypal shapes, eyes, heads and more that seem to come from somewhere in our deep subconscious, as if they are images created at the root base of the universal program. Suddenly, and strangely, things could start to make some kind of sense. Everything we do would be monitored, our explorations of space watched, our evolution monitored, our weapons, technology, communications, politics, everything. Exactly like the reports we have from thousands of people across the globe. As we watch the animals in a zoo, so too would these true aliens be watching us. Not from another planet, not from another solar system or galaxy, but from outside of the simulation itself. Now there's a thought. Now we have several theories to go on. Real alien life forms from our realm of reality that travel across the vast expanse of space to visit us. Real life forms that do not travel, but somehow bend the quantum world to appear before us. Or visitors to the zoo that is our existence. We should always remember these theories when looking at the evidence, such as the following. There is a man who worked for NASA as a spacecraft operator at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He was involved in over 650 missions, including the Mercury and Apollo expeditions and the Space Shuttle period. His name is Clark McClelland. And it was during this time on the Space Shuttle mission that he witnessed something very strange. According to McClelland, he was monitoring the mission from his desk at the Kennedy Launch Control Center when he saw something. Here's his statement. I, Clark C. McClelland, former spacecraft operator, Space Shuttle Fleet, personally observed an 8 to 9 foot tall ET on 27-inch video monitors while on duty in the Space Kennedy Center, Launch Control Center. The ET was standing upright in the Space Shuttle payload bay, having a discussion with two tethered US NASA astronauts. I also observed on my monitors the spacecraft of the ET, as it was in a stabilized, safe orbit to the rear of the Space Shuttle main engine pods. I observed this incident for about 1 minute and 7 seconds. Plenty of time to memorize all that I was observing. It was an ET and alien starship. Could he have been mistaken, seeing something different, and his mind filled in the gaps? He points out that in many years he was working on these things, he had strong visual recognition of crafts created and flown by the human race, whether secret or otherwise. He claims that he was not the only witness, and that colleagues secretly confided that they too had witnessed the alien. Surely the man is making it all up and never worked at NASA. The fact is, he did. There is photographic evidence, and NASA have never denied his employment. He has also pointed a finger strongly at NASA for being a military establishment. Here's what he said. The Pentagon owns NASA. Some of the Department of Defense missions I participated in were top secret. Those missions carried TS satellites and other space mission hardware into orbit, where several crews met with ETs. He claims that the US government has been keeping a secret a long-standing military alliance with aliens for decades, in league with the Human Exchange Program. A close friend of McClelland is the astronaut Edgar Mitchell. He has openly stated his belief in aliens visiting Earth. Mitchell stated that he was 90% sure that many of the thousands of UFOs recorded since the 1940s belongs to visitors from other planets. Mitchell is one of a growing number of NASA astronauts that are coming out from behind the veil of lies. Edgar Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon. He was an highly intelligent man, top astronaut and American hero. He states quite openly that very high-ranking military officials saw alien ships monitoring the 1940s nuclear weapons tests. His strong belief in alien visitation started as he landed on the moon in 1971, and his discoveries have since simply boosted that belief. But why would aliens be interested in our nuclear tests? He said they wanted to know about our military capabilities. My own experience talking to people has made it clear the ETs had been attempting to keep us from going to war and to help create peace on Earth. He says that witnesses who were manning the missile bases at the time have come forward and backed his claim, adding more intellectual weight to the cover-up. He said other officers from bases in the Pacific told me their test missiles were frequently shot down by alien spacecraft. It does make sense. As mankind developed nuclear technology, that is precisely when we begin to see a spike in the sightings of UFOs, as if they knew. Nuclear physics messes with the quantum world, it causes a stir at the quantum level that could easily be picked up by aliens with greater quantum technology, or indeed observed by those outside of the quantum simulation. Before this period, sightings were there, but not as regular. They came in the guise of angels and ghosts, chariots in the sky, and more. All sightings, but based on a previous unscientific mindset. Nick Pope, who used to work for the British Ministry of Defence, stated, "There have been some genuinely fascinating and unexplained UFO sightings around nuclear facilities and military bases." Edgar Mitchell's credentials are beyond reproach. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering and a doctorate in Science in Aeronautics and Astronautics. And no matter how many times we are told that Roswell was a weather balloon by a PR executive at NASA or the Air Force, Edgar Mitchell disagrees and says it was totally real. In answer to Dr. Mitchell's claims, NASA simply said, "Dr. Mitchell is a great American, but we do not share his opinions on this issue." And yet, NASA's astronauts are coming out more and more. Gordon Cooper was an original astronaut with the Mercury project. A perfect, all-American hero with a brilliant mind. He was planned to go to the moon, but Alan Shepard went instead, and so Cooper was chosen for the relatively unknown project to fly astronauts to Mars in 1981. It was planned to use nuclear-powered engines, which were actually made, but then the program was cancelled. Before all of this, Cooper had been a pilot, and in 1951 he was flying over Germany in an F-86 jet. Just as his craft reached supersonic speed, he and the other pilots looked up and saw a large group of flying saucers in formation. The UFOs were higher than even his jet could fly, and they were going way too fast. Over the course of several days, he and more pilots witnessed hundreds more. He was completely convinced that those craft were not of human origin. They all dutifully reported their sightings and awaited the response. High-flying seed pods. He knew that the answer was a lie, but as a member of the Air Force, he simply accepted it and carried on with his duties. Even at that time, years before his exploring of space with NASA, Cooper knew that UFOs were in reality aliens. By 1978, he decided not to remain silent and wrote a letter to the United Nations. It said, "I do believe UFOs exist, and that the truly unexplained ones are from some other, technically advanced civilization. I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets, which are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth. I feel that we need to have a top-level, coordinated program to scientifically collect and analyse data from all over the Earth concerning any type of encounter, and to determine how best to interface with these visitors in a friendly fashion." He later said that the aliens seem to show themselves when and where and to whom they want. I wish they would pick some people who really want to meet them, instead of a couple of fishermen in Mississippi. Cooper, like Mitchell, believes that Roswell was a real alien event, and even explained how the military had live aliens. Back in the 1950s, at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, a friend of his was a rocket scientist. One day, while working alone, his friend heard somebody calling his name. He looked around and saw nobody. Then again the voice was heard. It said, "Don't worry, I'm above you in a craft a few miles up." According to Cooper, the voice was that of an alien spy who was looking for information on what the humans were doing. At this time, they were testing nuclear power, weapons, and advanced rockets. The visitor wanted information to allow him to live among us. The man agreed to help and brought the visitor books. He went aboard the craft and noted how the alien looked very much like us, but had trouble breathing in our atmosphere. It took him 5 years to adjust, and he stayed in close contact with Cooper's friend. The story behind all of this is very interesting. It turns out that the visitor was part of a group of explorers who had been in space for a very long time, when their planet died. They had no wish to invade, but just to find a home. But what about the other astronauts? Have they seen anything? We already know that Buzz Aldrin saw something, but what about Armstrong? According to the Russians, the CIA and NASA are covering up what they all saw. The Russians say that both Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong saw spacecraft moments after landing on the moon, and that they relayed a message back to Mission Control that 2 large objects landed near to them and were observing them. They even state that Aldrin took colour footage of the UFOs from inside their module and continued filming when Armstrong went outside. They claim that the CIA are behind the cover-up. Can't be true, surely. That's not like the CIA at all. According to Armstrong, aliens actually have a base on the moon, and humans were being warned off. Radio hams with their own VHF receiving facilities bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets and picked up the following exchange from the moon. Mission Control calling Apollo 11. Apollo 11. These babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my God. You wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there, lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They're on the moon, watching us. Armstrong later said in an interview, "It was incredible. Of course we had always known there was a possibility. The fact is, we were warned off. There was never any question then of a space station or a moon city. I can't go into details, except to say that their ships were far superior to ours, both in size and technology, and boy were they big and menacing. No, there is no question of a space station." Naturally, NASA has committed at that time and couldn't risk panic on Earth, but it really was a quick scoop and back again. Another astronaut and test pilot to witness something was Major Robert White. While flying at 58 miles above the Earth in an X-15 aircraft in 1962, Major White saw something strange. He said over the radio to control, "I have no idea what it could be. It was greyish in colour and about 30 to 40 feet away. There are things out there. There absolutely is." In 1951, Mercury astronaut Donald Slayton revealed that he too had seen UFOs. Here's what he said. "I was testing a P-51 fighter in Minneapolis when I spotted this object. I was at about 10,000 feet on a nice bright sunny afternoon. I thought the object was a kite. Then I realised that no kite is going to fly that high. As I got closer, it looked like a weather balloon, grey and about 3 feet in diameter. But as soon as I got behind the damn thing, it didn't look like a balloon anymore. It looked like a saucer, a disc. About the same time, I realised that it was suddenly going away from me, and there I was, running at about 300 miles per hour. I tracked it for a little way, and then all of a sudden, the damn thing just took off. It pulled about 45-degree climbing turn and accelerated and just flat disappeared." In 1965, astronauts Ed White and James McDivitt were flying over the Hawaiian Islands in the Gemini spacecraft when they saw a strange-looking metallic object with long arms coming from it. Astronaut Gordon Cooper confirmed that McDivitt filmed the incident, but it has never been released. Two Gemini astronauts, James Lovell and Frank Borman, witnessed a UFO in space in 1965. Borman said it was some distance from the capsule, but Mission Control told him it was just the final stage of their rocket booster. Problem with that was, Borman could see the rocket booster, but it wasn't the UFO. Here's what he said. "Lovell, bogey at 10 o'clock high. Control, this is Houston. Say again, 7. Lovell, said we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high. Control, Gemini 7, is that the booster or is it an actual sighting? Lovell, we have several actual sighting. Control, estimated size or distance? Lovell, we also have the booster in sight." That is as much as we are allowed to know. Later, when James Lovell was on the Apollo 8 mission, he stated over his radio, "Please be informed that there is a Santa Claus," as he came around from the dark side of the moon. Santa Claus is the code word used by NASA for UFOs. Maurice Chatelain was the chief of NASA Communications Systems, and he confirmed that Neil Armstrong had reported seeing 2 alien spacecraft on the rim of a crater when he was walking on the moon. Chatelain was a respected scientist and engineer and had 11 patents to his name. He mentioned the term Santa Claus in an interview. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, but nobody talked about it until now. I think that Wally Schirra aboard Mercury 8 was the first of the astronauts to use the code name Santa Claus to indicate the presence of flying saucers next to space capsules. So if we know there's something up there, and so too do the NASA's astronauts, then surely we should be looking for them. Well, NASA pilot Joseph Walker is on record as having said that one of his tasks was to detect UFOs during his X-15 test flights. Eugene Cernan was the commander of the Apollo 17 mission. He too saw objects and stated in 1973 that, "I've been asked about UFOs and I've said publicly, I thought they were somebody else, some other civilization." Indeed, statements from several highly intelligent and qualified astronauts are sufficient in law to pass as eyewitness accounts and would be taken into account. Here's what some of them have said publicly and on record. Astronaut Gordon Cooper said, "Several days in a row we sighted groups of metallic saucer-shaped vehicles at great altitudes over the base, and we tried to get close to them, but they were able to change direction faster than our fighters. I do believe UFOs exist, and that the truly unexplained ones are from some other technologically advanced civilization. From my association with aircraft and spacecraft, I think I have a pretty good idea of what everyone on this planet has, and their performance capabilities, and I'm sure some of the UFOs at least are not from anywhere on Earth." Astronaut Edgar Mitchell. "I've talked with people of military and government credentials and position and heard their stories, and their desire to tell their stories openly to the public, and that got my attention very, very rapidly. The first-hand experiences of these credible witnesses that, now in advanced years are anxious to tell their story. We can't deny that, and the evidence points to the fact that Roswell was a real incident, and that indeed an alien craft did crash, and that material was recovered from that crash site." Russian cosmonaut Pavel Popovich said, "Today, it can be stated with a high degree of confidence that observed manifestations of UFOs are no longer confined to the modern picture of the world, or the simple refutation of the orthodox natural science paradigm. The historical evidence of the phenomenon, the singularity of its newly gained kinematic, energetic and psychophysical features allows us to hypothesize that ever since mankind has been coexisting with this extraordinary substance, it has manifested a high level of intelligence and technology. The UFO sightings have become the constant component of human activity and require a serious global study. In order to realize the position of man on Earth and in the universe, ufology and the scientific study of the UFO phenomenon should take place in the midst of the other scientists dealing with man and the world." Another Russian cosmonaut, Viktor Afanasyev, said, "It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long, with inner hulls. The object was narrow here and wider here, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away." Cosmonaut Major General Vladimir Kovaloniuk, when speaking about the Salyut 6th mission in 1981, said, "Many cosmonauts have seen phenomena which are far beyond the experiences of Earthmen. For 10 years I have never spoken on such things. At that time we were over the area of South Africa, moving towards the area of the Indian Ocean. I was just made some gymnastic exercises when I saw in front of me, through a porthole, an object which I could not explain. It is impossible to determine distances in space. A small object can appear large and far away, and the other way round. Sometimes a cloud of dust appears like a large object. Anyway, I saw this object, and then something happened I could not explain. Something impossible according to the laws of physics. The object had this shape, elliptical, and flew with us. From a frontal view, it looked like it would rotate in flight direction. It only flew straight, but then a kind of explosion happened. Very beautiful to watch, a golden light. This was the first part. Then 1 or 2 seconds later, a second explosion followed somewhere else, and 2 spheres appeared, golden and very beautiful. After this explosion, I saw white smoke, then a cloud-like sphere. Before we entered the darkness, we flew through this terminator, the twilight zone between day and night. We flew eastwards, and when we entered the darkness of the Earth's shadow, I could not see them any longer. The 2 spheres never returned. It appears that the Russians don't silence their cosmonauts half as much as the Americans. Here's another cosmonaut, Musa Manarov of the Mir mission in 1991. It happened during a visit mission, when all our attention was focused on the slowly approaching space capsule. I was close to the great porthole, from where I could see our approaching visitors. I watched everything very carefully. When the capsule came closer, I filmed it with a professional Betacam camera. Suddenly, I noticed something below the spaceship, which first I looked like an antenna. Only when I looked closer and analysed the situation, I realised that there was no antenna at all. But first I thought it was part of the construction. But then this element started to move. It moved away from the ship. So I grabbed the radio and told them, "Hey boys, you are losing something." This of course alarmed them. With all my experience, especially with docking manoeuvres in space, I can tell you that especially in this phase, simply nothing can break off at all. If something would have been lost, it would have been torn off long before, during the launch, the manoeuvres, the turn, all these much more energetic flight phases. Now we were just gliding slowly towards each other without any pressure on the capsule. But then this something started to remove downwards. When it flew away, it attracted all our attention. It looked like it was rotating. It was difficult to estimate its dimensions. If it was close or far away, I could not say. It was in free sight, and in space, it is difficult to estimate any size and distance. I can only say for sure that it was not very close, since I set the camera for infinity. If it would have been just a screw or something close to us, it would have been out of focus. The object was quite far away, in any case at least 300 feet, since this was the distance of the space capsule, and I had the impression that it was beyond it. It is possible that it was a kind of UFO. We can't say with any certainty what it was. It was definitely not a bigger piece of space junk, no rocket or part of so, since this would have been located. The space surveillance, ours, and the American, locate all bigger objects in space. They are followed. For every minute we know their position and their flight direction. If such an object would have come so close to the Mir, they would have located it and informed us. I don't think it was a piece of space junk or debris. There is a lot of that in the Earth orbit, satellite parts, rocket parts, just everything. But our space surveillance locates them, and according to them, there was nothing. Another Mir cosmonaut said, "On the last 2 flights I saw something. During the flight of 1990, I called our commander, 'Come to the porthole.' Unfortunately, but this is typical, we did not manage to put a film in the camera quickly enough to film it. We looked on Newfoundland. The atmosphere was completely clear, and suddenly a kind of sphere appeared. I want to compare it with a Christmas tree decoration, beautiful, shiny, glittering. I saw it for 10 seconds. The sphere appeared in the same way as it disappeared again. What it was, what size it had, I don't know. There was nothing I could compare it with. I was like struck by lightning by this phenomena. It was a perfect sphere, glittering like a Christmas tree decoration. I reported to the Mission Control Centre, but I did not say that I had seen a UFO. I said I saw a kind of unusual phenomenon. I had to be careful with my choice of words. I don't want someone to speculate too much or quote me wrong. General Pavel Romanovich Popovich of the Soviet Air Force related his experience. It was in 1978 when we flew from Washington to Moscow. We flew in an altitude of 30,600 feet, and suddenly, when I looked through the windshield, I noticed something flying at around 4,500 feet above us on a parallel course, a glowing white equilateral triangle resembling a sail. Since our speed was 600 miles per hour, the triangle must have had a speed of at least 900 miles per hour since it overtook us. I called the attention of all passengers and crew members on it. We tried to find out what it was, but all attempts to identify it as something known ultimately failed. This object looked like a UFO, and it remained unidentified. It did not look like an airplane, since it was perfect triangle. No aeroplane at that time had such a shape. The head of the I Command Academy of Air Defence has gone on record. He said, "Yes, there were particularly mysterious occurrences during military practice. At times, targets appeared, on which fighters in the air or radars set for anti-aircraft missiles trained them, but it was difficult to determine what they were exactly. We tried to take into account the problem of UFOs. Quite a bit of interesting material has appeared, and it's perfectly obvious it needs to be studied in earnest, and that it's necessary to address this question on a government level." Right now, you are more and more inclined to believe that UFOs exist. But what stands behind this? The first you think of are extraterrestrial visitors. Military men are not usually disposed to speculation. They report the facts, every fact. They give location, heights, speeds. They rarely express such ideas about aliens. And yet, here we have seen men of high integrity, intelligence and experience. They all believe that there is some form of alien life invading our very airspace and even the space around planet Earth. There has to be an explanation for all of this, and there is. The aliens are here, among us,